What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Disturbing the Priest. I'm your host, Brandon Baddock, and I am joined here today by the lovely Nate Fillers. What is up?
Hi, that was
How's
a
it
nice
going?
intro. That was a nice little intro. Thank you.
Well, thank you so
I'm,
much.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty well, pretty well. It's an honor to have you on again. Um, hey, the more the merrier.
Hell yeah.
Hopefully, you'll be a regular on this podcast.
I would love to be.
Um, all right, so the topic we have today are bad albums by good bands. Now there's a lot of like good metal bands out there, obviously, and a lot of them have like really, really good discographies, like front to back. Like
Mhm.
there are a few hiccups and whatnot, and a few albums that might be just like too boring, or which might like just kind of suck, but there's never like a bad album, I find, but
Yeah.
sometimes there are. And I would love to actually shine light on some of those albums that are just like bad albums by really classic, really good bands. And I'd love to start with let's just get this one out of the way.
Okay.
All right, let's just get this one out of the way. Um, Saint Anger. Funny thing about this CD, I bought this, or I didn't really buy it. I work at a record store, and it was upside down. I work at a record store, and I found this. Like, we got a few CDs, and I found this on. I brought it to my boss. I'm like, "How much for this?" He's like, "You can just have it." So
That's
I so
awesome.
I put it in my car, and it just didn't work. Like, seriously, I've never like, and it's not really scratched or anything. It was just like a dud. The CD just couldn't play. I brought it. I have a CD player behind me, like hook up to my
Mhm.
receiver. Everything's all hooked up. I've got really nice speakers too, and I threw it in and it just didn't play. It's just broken.
Wow.
Um,
Lars just went around to music stores with a magnet and just like
yeah, and you would think too, because like even in the documentary, like their focus was CDs for this album. Like they didn't really press it on vinyl, I don't think, when this come out 2003. So yeah, I don't think this was ever like really first pressed on vinyl like when it came out. So it's really funny to see that they've it just sucks. Even the physical media sucks on this album. Like I remember listening to this album for the first time. Um, and all right, so the album starts with Frantic. And Frantic's like has a cool start. Like it's like especially like listening to this album for the first time, they're like, all right, this is a like kind of a cool song. And then you just get that snare. Like it is in such a in your face middle finger introduction to the snare, and it is like it just rattled my whole body when I heard it for the first time. It was just awful. And this whole album, just this snare drives me insane. I think what they should do is re-release this album. Maybe they can change the color palette or something. The red and orange looks really cool, but I don't know. I think they should redo it. I think they should re-record the drumming on it and like change the production up a little bit. Um, and then maybe people actually might be like, "Hey, it's not a bad album."
yeah.
Also, whittle it down to a single LP. This shouldn't be a double LP record. Um, but just like going into the track list, like there are some good songs on here. I will defend some of the songs on here. Frantic, Saint Anger, and Some Kind of Monster is pretty good. Again, this song should be like I think whittled down a little bit. But there's some good songs. Dirty Window is actually not bad either. So it's like the first, I say like four songs are fine, and again, like I'm saying this in contrast to the rest of the record. The song Invisible Kid sounds like it was written by like a third grader who's like mad at his parents. This song's exactly what you think. It's just some kid who's like, no one cares about me.
Is that
uh
the one with the cheesy lyrics?
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is like the worst lyrics in a Metallica record to date. Like James is an amazing lyricist. I actually prefer the Four Horsemen over the Mechanics because I
Yeah.
think Day James is a really, really good lyricist, and I don't know, man, like this record, some of the lyrics are so weird, and they're not as weird as like Lulu,
Mhm.
which I think Lulu, it's really hard to even like throw that album into the pool. I think it's its own animal, honestly. But this album, All Within My Hands is fine. There's just so many just like boring or forgettable tracks on this. They should have totally just like gotten this down to 40 minutes most.
Mhm.
This could have easily been like a 35 minute record. Change the drumming. I saw recently, um, I think this was like a week ago. James brought up, he's like, "Hey, it's the Saint Anger anniversary," and everyone booed. Um, because it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I know
It's
they're
that
trying to
album.
like, and like I'd get excited to hear like maybe Dirty Window live. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I think that'd be cool. But
The whole album, as a
yeah,
tour,
I like
that's
the
pretty rough.
first four songs would be cool to hear live. I heard they have been playing Dirty Window like in a lot of their sets recently, but it's like I don't know, at the same time, like they just need to re-release this record and fix it up. A lot of the issues on some of my albums like I picked for this episode, it's just like either like a production issue or it's just
Yeah, same.
it was a messy recording process.
Yeah,
You know
I'm
what
in
I
the same
mean?
boat. Same boat.
Yeah. But that's Bob Rock also was on it. It's I don't know, man. Saint Anger is weird. It's a weird record.
Fair.
That's my first pick.
Now I'm gonna be super controversial. Well, I guess not super, but just regular controversial. My pick, my first pick was actually Metallica and Justice for All.
Really?
Yes, and
Seriously?
this is a big statement because
Wow.
I know it's like it's a legendary album.
It's my favorite Metallica record.
It's great. However, the reason why it gets shit from me is because what they did to Jason.
You're a
They
bassist.
kind
I
of
should have
fucked him up.
known.
I'm a bass player, so but overall, I think that like that really sucks. I'm surprised he didn't just immediately quit the band. Because like so for those of you who don't know, um Metallica had an amazing bass player by the name of Cliff Burton, and he got into a car accident and he passed away. Um, but that didn't stop Metallica from like getting back to work like right away. They got a new bass player. What's his last name? Newsted.
Jason Newsted.
Newsted. Um, and he was good. They even say that his bass lines
He's
were
awesome.
amazing. Like, but there's sort of like this up in the air concept of like what happened. So what they basically did is they basically turned off his bass track for the whole album.
Yeah.
They like
It's
just completely
unhearable.
unaudible. You can't hear it at all.
Yeah.
He recorded the whole album and they basically said, hey, turn the drums and the guitar up and turn the bass all the way down. And even so, like the producer's like, are you sure? Like,
Yeah.
and they're like, yeah, yeah. So the mixed theories that I've heard is that he played something too similar to what James was playing,
Hmm.
and they like kind of fought each other in the mix frequency wise. So they decided to like just cut his out. Um, that's like I think that's like the main theory that most like
I've heard a lot of things. Yeah.
some people are like, oh, it's because like he was way too different than Cliff, and they didn't want like to jar the audience that way or anything. It's so up in the air of why they decided to do that. It's definitely really weird. But the thing that drives me crazy is it's a great album. Like it doesn't deserve to be on the list of bad albums by good bands. However, I do think that wasn't the best choice Like I would have loved to hear what he did. Because like the producers were like, yeah, he's amazing. He did amazing stuff. He, even helped write some of it, and they just kind of threw him off the album, which is kind of like a shitty thing to do. Um,
Yeah, I've heard quite a lot about Injustice for All. So the producer, the guy who's going to mix this record, went into Injustice for All saying, "I'm going to make Master of Puppets sound like a demo tape compared to this record."
yeah.
And it was actually Lars who approached him and was like, "Hey, I have a few things I want you to keep in mind for the mix." And he was like, "You're kidding me." He's like, "You're joking." And actually fought him enough where uh Lars didn't get his way completely, but they kind of met in the middle.
Mhm.
So God knows what it would have sounded like if Lars like had complete creative control
Yeah.
on the mix of that record. Uh and also like later in the future, Lars actually like ran into like the producer and like was like, "Hey, people talk about that mix a lot. Whatever happened with that?" And he's like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think it's a really hard thing to discuss at the same time because I feel like Metallica don't even know. Like it's definitely a Lars issue. And I feel like all this stuff, like even Saint Anger, like it's a
Mhm.
Lars problem.
It is.
Um, but yeah, for me, what I like about this record is I love the guitar tone. I think it's my favorite on any Metallica record.
Oh,
I
absolutely. It's
think it
great.
has the best Metallica riffs. I love proggy Metallica, and this is their most progressive record.
Mhm.
One is one of the
It's
best songs they've
amazing.
ever
It's
written.
so good.
Dyer's Eve is like their fastest, thrashiest song they've ever put out. Like it's just a fantastic record.
But doesn't it
Um,
like bother you that it could have been more? Like, does
I
that
think about it
bother
all the
you?
time. I think
Okay.
about that all the time, especially that quote where the producer's like, "I'm gonna make
Yeah.
like Master of Puppets sound like a demo tape compared to this one. What it could have been,
Yeah.
what this album seriously could have been."
I've read articles and heard interviews, and they won't change it. They won't change the snare drum on Saint Anger, and they won't change the bass tone on this one because they say like it's history now. Like no matter how much people, and they might take that back, but they're like, it's so a part of the Metallica history to have like it's the album without bass. It's the album with the tin snare. It's like I completely agree with you. I would really like to hear both of those albums remixed and remastered. And some fans out there have made like I don't know how they did it, but they boosted up the bass and they did some science shit and and like made it like this is what it would sound like. And
Yeah.
it's I don't know, it's could have been something. So it
Yeah, it's
hurts. It
really
hurts.
unfortunate. Really unfortunate.
But I will agree that it doesn't deserve to fully be on this list. However, I did want to talk about it because that aspect of the album makes it bad to me.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like I think that's a very fair um you know album to put on the list for those reasons. Like
Yeah,
justice for Jason, you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
it's really bad. And like Metallica had a history with just hazing him. And
Hmm.
apparently this wasn't a part of it, but how weirdly convenient
Yeah.
that they totally like erased him out of like Injustice for All. And it sucks. It really does. I think a part of it was because of Cliff. I
Yeah.
seriously think that's why he wasn't on the album. I think it was almost like a moment of silence, funny enough,
Yeah. I
for
can see that.
Cliff's absence. But at the same time, I don't know. It's it's a great record. Like it could have been better, but unfortunately, there's a lot of Metallica albums that suffer bad production and just like bad overall mixes.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not sure if you have any other Metallica albums on your list. I don't.
No, that's it. Yeah.
But Death Magnetic is another one to bring up. Rick Rubin did everything on that.
Of opinions about him.
And he butchered that album. It is turned up to 11. It is the loudest thing you will ever hear. You will never get a break while listening to that record.
He has this problem. He just loves to just completely like block, so like compress the fuck out of everything.
Yeah,
and
so
it just
like
sucks.
so
Like,
compressed.
yeah, because like one of my favorite albums he did, and I think that, I mean, this is off topic, but Mars Volta, their first album was done by him, and it's by far one of my favorite albums of all time. However, it's one of those where I'm like, I wish I could hear what it would sound like by a good producer.
Yeah.
Because he just like completely made, like, if I'm sure if you were looking at the waveform of it, it would just be just a complete block.
Just a block. It's really ridiculous. The fact that he has the legacy that he has.
Yeah.
And like he mixed, like, he produced Rain in Blood and System of a Down, Toxicity, right?
I think so.
Like,
I
he
mean,
has some good, and Beastie Boys, like, he has some great albums under his belt, but it's just a shame. Like, it really sucks. And with Death Magnetic, there actually has been like people like online who have like put polls out and whatnot, and of trying to like gather signatures to get an alternate mix of that record. And it's because it was on Guitar Hero. There was like a Guitar Hero Metallica, I believe, at some point.
Yeah, there was.
And there were a couple Death Magnetic songs, and a Guitar Hero actually had to remix the song for Guitar Hero, and people have been begging for that to be on Spotify, or just Guitar Hero to remix the whole record.
Guitar Hero is hilarious. Like specifically with Metallica, because like they have like the drum track for one of them where it's like a trigger, because like Lars uses triggers. So like you only have to hit the drum set once and it does like the trigger. Yeah. And then also for one, usually you can play like the guitar or bass track of that. It's just two guitars. So I was that's part of the reason why I was like really bummed about it. I was just like, I really wanted to play some bass from Metallica, and you play that song and it's just two guitars. And I was like,
yeah. It really sucks though with Injustice for All, because that could have probably been your favorite Metallica album.
Definitely.
Because I know how much you're into like just progressive metal in general.
Yeah.
And that's what draws me to that record so much. Thankfully I can hear past that. But like, I can also acknowledge how awful it is. But yeah, Injustice for All. Very very controversial take.
I told you.
For me, my next one is actually a Black Sabbath one. It's Forbidden. I'm not sure if you know this one. I think this is their worst record. Came out in 1995. It is a Tony Martin era Sabbath record, and where do I even start with it? So there's a song called Illusion of Power, and there's an Ice-T cameo that comes out of nowhere.
Whoa.
Yeah, on a Black Sabbath album. And like, listen, Ice-T's been making his rounds, you know what I mean? Like, Ice-T was on the new Megadeth record, The Sick, the Dying, the Dead, which kind of worked, I guess. But here it just doesn't. It really did not work for me at all. And this whole album, like, the production sucks. It is just almost like muddy. It's hard to listen to. I've heard rumors that Tony Iommi is going to like remix this record and re-release it, which I pray he does, because I like a lot of the material on it, but it's just such a mess. I think a lot of the songs are like weak on it. I think it's like the album alone is, I guess, fine, but it's a real black sheep when it comes to the rest of Metallica's discography. Like I thought, um, or I think if this album came out without anything backing it up, like if a band was to put this record out, it would have gotten forgotten so long ago.
But because it was Black Sabbath, it was
I think it's the name that um
kept it alive.
kept this record alive. Yeah. But I don't know, man. Like a lot of the songs, like Illusion of Power is pretty cool. It's fine. The Ice-T cameo is a little weird. And a lot of the songs just seem a little forgettable as well. Um, and again, like I'm into black metal. I even have the album Born Again behind me, which people hold like the worst Sabbath record because it has almost like this black metal level of like production to it, but I actually kind of dig it. But this album, it just doesn't really fit. Like the production just seems off. Like at least with Born Again, like it's like the eeriest Sabbath album, and it's just like a scary record in general. So having that bad production, I feel like the eeriness of the record makes up for it because it makes the album, if anything, like more eerie and more scary. But the thing is with this one, it's not a scary album. It's not an eerie album. It's just it's a Sabbath record. Of course, there's some scary elements, but I don't know. The production just doesn't work with it. Also, my favorite song off it's probably the song called "Get a Grip," which I think is just like a worse version of Zero the Hero off Born Again. I don't know. I think it's a rough record. I hope Tony Iommi remixes it, re-releases it, so I can hopefully change my opinion on it. But it's always a rough listen every time I listen to it. And if anything, I grow farther from it every time I give this album a spin. But you know, Tony Iommi's has been re-releasing all the Ozzy era stuff. Um, some Dio now. He actually re-released Dehumanizer, which is the third Dio album with Sabbath. And I thought that was fantastic. So I hope he keeps doing that. I want to see more Tony Martin stuff get re-released because there's so many hidden, buried Black Sabbath albums that people don't even know that exist. There's a bunch actually.
Yeah, I was just going through it and I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah. Unfortunately, these only like exist on YouTube and wherever you can find them. But
Mhm.
it's just a shame that these albums don't get the light of day and that they don't get the production they deserve. Because like it's crazy that you look at like Sabbath 70s stuff and the production's still better than, and this was 95. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
it's just ridiculous. But hopefully, Forbidden gets remixed. I love a lot of the material on this record. It's just the production ruins it for me. It's just awful. I know another album people put up there by Sabbath that they don't like, which is a pretty popular take I see a lot, is 13. Their recent one with Ozzy and their last release. I can't imagine Sabbath putting out another record. But I actually dig 13. It was also funny enough mixed by Rick Rubin, and it's
What are the odds?
compressed to hell.
But it
It
works.
is so loud. It is so obnoxious. But for me, the material just shines
Yeah.
over the production. Again, like I like some of the stuff on Forbidden, but it's just the material isn't strong enough to outshine the production.
Gotcha.
I think if 13, the track list was like resorted and the production was different, I think like that could have been a fantastic record, 13. Um, but unfortunately, we get like a double LP that's super compressed. We get bonus tracks that are better than a lot of the stuff on the on the album itself. It's just like it's like what happened? Like Rick Rubin really kind of destroyed 13. And again, like God is Dead is a classic in my opinion. Loner's really good. Age of Reason's really good. Zeitgeist I like. Um, I think 13 gets a lot of hate. I think it's, if anything, overhated. And I think Forbidden takes it for like the worst Black Sabbath record. And
Wow,
that's my second one.
sweet. Let me see. For my second one, I'll talk about one of my favorite bands of all time, Protest a Hero. We talked about that in the progressive one episode. Um, so they started off kind of like, all right, so I'll just Scurrilous is the album I'm going to talk about. And the reason why is the first two albums, Keziah and Fortress, um, were written like the lyrics were written by the bassist. A lot of themes with me, I know, but no, but the bassist was like an award-winning writer. Like
Okay.
he has won. I can't remember what it, but like because they're from Canada, so I don't really know awards in Canada. Um, but he's an amazing lyricist. But for whatever reason, the singer Rhodey Walker decided that he was going to take the helm for the lyrics in this album. Um, and which is not to say that he completely botched them, but I think what makes Keziah and Fortress a little bit more meatier is that Rhodey only had to worry about like making like the vocals interesting. Like he could treat it like an actual instrument. He had the words, and then he had the melodies from what the other guys were making, and he just found a way to make his part interesting. I
Hmm.
think what happened on Scurrilous is that he was too busy making the vocal or like writing the lyrics to really focus on making the vocals interesting. And a lot of the times they just come off kind of cheesy, or like, it's like it's just not layered, or it's just not interesting.
Yeah.
um the instruments behind it are pretty cool. Everybody does like an instrumental version of it is awesome. But um I loved the album when it first came out. It was one of those things where like I somebody mentioned it to me, and then the bubble was shattered. They're like, yeah,
Mm,
the lyrics are a little cheesy though. And then I like went back. I'm like, oh my god, I didn't even, because I don't really care about lyrics when it comes to like listening to music. I'm more of like the musician part. Like, I want to know what the drums are doing. I want to know what the guitars and bass. I'm more into that. But then once somebody mentioned that, I was like, that's all I can think about is like, what would the album be like if Arf is the bassist, well, former bassist. He left after the album that precedes this. Um, so yeah, we're talking. This is 2011, so I've held on to that opinion for a while. I went back and I like listened to it, and I'm like, there's just some songs that are just so brutal that it just kills me. And like I said, I love Protest the Hero. They're one of
yeah.
my favorite bands of all time. And yeah,
Isn't that the worst though, when you listen to an album for the first time, you really like it,
yeah,
and then you hear all these opinions on it and all this whatnot, and then you go back and re-listen, you're like, oh, all right, this is a garbage record. This is
yeah.
not a
And
good album.
I don't mean to be like a conformist or anything like that. Like, it's just like it was so accurate that I couldn't
Yeah.
avoid it. It's like usually like there's tons of bands that I listen to that are like my guilty pleasure. Then I'm like, I don't care. I know they're fucking lame or cheesy or whatever, and they have like people shit on them all the time. But I'm like, it's fine. But the reason why it hurt so much was, if you look at the lyrics from Fortress and then look at the lyrics of Scurrilous, it's like, oh, what could it have been? Because So Kazaya, just a quick little refresher for everybody. Kazaya is a concept album. It's all about like this these three characters. There's Kazaya, priest, and prison executioner. And it's all about this girl who was convicted. And then it follows each of the characters. So it's the
Hmm.
conviction from the perspective of the priest, the conviction based on like Keziah and the executioner. And you get like kind of like, oh, this is my job. This is what I'm supposed to do. And then like by song three of each character, they're like, do I have the right to play God? And it's cool. It's a cool concept. Um, Watered down version of Fortress is basically just it goes through like the evolution of like human history, like Genghis Khan being like a conqueror and everything like that, and
Cool.
like how we fucked up the planet and everything. Like it just goes through it. I don't really get that from Scurrilous. Scurrilous is like, okay, the first song's about like how killing yourself is overrated. And then the second song is about like how cigarettes are ruining his life. Like, or you know, how like cancer is bad. Like one of the, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
it's just different. And I really would have loved to see what ARF could have made, like
Yeah, that's
concept
really
wise.
unfortunate. And there are a few albums I've run into that like kind of suffer the same thing. But I hate when people prioritize, like you were saying, like with the lyrics.
Yeah.
Um, and there's no really balance. There are albums that exist like that where there's so much emphasis on one part, but it's like I wish everything was just like equally worked on and balanced.
Mhm.
So that's a really good take because that is something that happens like in a lot of music, I feel like,
Yeah.
um, which results in just like terrible records.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not necessarily their fault too, because Fortress on my list is like way up there as possibly like one of the best metal albums of all time.
wow,
Like,
really?
yeah, for me personally, like it just, I mean, it can't be of all time, I guess. It's got to be like in the progressive category because there's so many different styles of metal that you
Yeah,
can't just say like, oh, this is the best metal album. It's like because metal means so many different things to different
so
people.
much, so much.
But like, I don't know, like something about Fortress is just like on another level for me. I don't know. It's just really well
Cool.
written, and every single part was thought through completely because the lyrics were all set, and he made the vocals interesting. The guitars are interesting. The drums are interesting. There's tons of cool riffs. There's tons of cool parts. There's tons of cool lyrics. And to follow that up with any other album, maybe they just tried to take the L. You know, they're like, we're not going to beat Fortress, so we might as well just like, you know.
Yeah,
But
Metallica did something similar, it feels like, with Load after the Black Album, you know what I mean? Where it's like,
yeah,
we're not gonna try to top that. We'll just
yeah,
just put out like an experimental record. How about that?
yeah. Maybe that's what they were doing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's my second take.
that's interesting. I haven't heard a ton from that band. But that is really unfortunate. That would probably ruin a record for me too, honestly.
Yeah,
Um, Bad lyrics really affect songs for me.
yeah,
Um, and potentially albums, and in your case it did.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that sucks. So my next pick is actually not Dope Smoker, but the album Jerusalem. um so
Interesting.
I'm not sure if you're familiar.
A little bit.
Sleep got signed on a label after after their most like commercially successful record, um in 90 something, Dragonaut, I believe it's called. And then they got signed, and their next release they wanted to do Dope Smoker. They're like, let's just make this like hour and 7 minute. And after the success of like the last record, and hearing um you know, Dope Smoker and what they wanted to do with it, and like when they heard it back and whatnot, no, what I'm trying to say is with Dope Smoker, they wrote it, all right. um and used all the money, like they got a ton of money from the label, wrote this behemoth of a record, uh, showed it to the label, and the label's like, "What is this? We cannot put this out. Are you kidding me? It's one song.
That's one song. Yeah, I was just about to ask you. It's like 1
Um,
hour long
it's an hour
song.
and like 6 minutes, I believe. Um, but the label's like, no, we gotta cut this up. We gotta release this. So they did some trimming and they called it like Jerusalem, and they completely butchered the record. Like they tried to cut it. There was a ton of like fade outs and fade ins. They were trying to like kind of like songify the record, where like and like give it a track list and whatnot. It just did not work at all. It was a disaster, and it actually caused the band to break up. Um,
Yeah, I'm looking at their discography, and I was like, oh, that's their last album.
yeah, they did get back together and release a record in 2018, though. The Sciences, which I think is fantastic and possibly their best release. Um, but I think like a bad record, a terrible record, like I think Jerusalem is a disaster. I think it's an awful album. I've heard that version of Dope Smoker. It is a train wreck. It sounds so choppy. It is just awful. It just does not make sense. You listen to it and you can tell like it was a vision that was butchered. And I think bad records aren't necessarily from a band, but possibly like from a label. A label could take it into their own hands and just completely butcher an album. And in Sleep's, you know, uh, and their discography, that's the case, unfortunately. They had this album completely ruin their motivation, like to be a band. It's crazy. It completely divided the guys. So I'm glad they're back together. They're on a little hiatus right now, but hopefully we'll see a Sleep tour soon. But yeah, that is my next pick,
You've
Jerusalem by Sleep.
you've talked about Dope Smoker before, right?
I actually have a whole episode
Yeah, that's what it was.
on
Because
it.
I
Yeah.
know I that's how I heard it. Because like you talked about it, and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna check it out, and I put it on. It's pretty long.
Yeah,
It's good though.
it's a long song. It's definitely a bathroom song, but
Yeah.
it's good. I when I was back in like radio in college, like you had to add songs manually like to the system. And
Mhm.
that was one of the songs I added, which I was super proud of. Like and the thing is like when you add it, it takes as long as the song is to add it.
Oh yeah.
So I had to camp out for that song. And it's funny because like you're just scrolling through the songs like on the system to play on radio, and it's like 3 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour and 7 minutes. So it was like
Yeah.
the ultimate bathroom song. I had a I had a radio show back in college called Into the Void, which this podcast is like the baby of that show. And I always had that song just like on the panel, like always like a click away, just in case, just in case that bean burrito didn't sit right, or if the building caught on fire,
That's pretty funny.
or if it was 420, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jerusalem is my pick.
Okay. Okay. Um, I'm trying to decide if I should talk about my next band or just go skip something in the list because it's kind of like I'll just go with like the next one.
Okay.
It's kind of fits the same kind of feeling as Protest a Hero. Between the Buried and Me, um, they put out an album called The Great Misdirect, and so my first listen through, I liked it a lot. And this isn't one of those like somebody told me things and I was like, oh, ruined. This was one of those things where I listened to it, and then so this album followed up like their masterpiece Colors, which is again up there in the greatest like progressive metal albums of all time. So it's
Yeah.
pretty hard to follow that. But there's some pretty good riffs in the Great Misdirect, but I think overall it's just a lot of waiting to get to those parts. And it's just kind of unfortunate that that's the case. Because like I listened to it recently and I couldn't stomach it. I was skipping
Wow.
through a lot. I was like, it just didn't age well. I don't know what it was. Like I still love Between the Buried and Me. Um, I just remember just, oh, I haven't listened to this album in a while. I put it on. I was like, man, I'm bored. Like, and but there was parts that I really liked, so I like would skip through and like listen to that part. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's they have like some interesting parts, and it is what it is, man. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess it's really hard for a band to follow up like just such a well put together like album. I have to imagine they worked so fucking hard on Colors, just like Protest worked so fucking hard on Fortress, that
Yeah.
like come their next album, they were just like, okay, let's see what else we can do.
It's really interesting. There's a lot of the bad albums by like these good bands are usually after like their best record or like most successful
Yeah.
record. Um, and I think it could either be an ego thing or they're drained or the label's pushing them to put something out and they're like, all right,
Yeah.
give us a sec,
Yeah.
and they're just completely creatively drained. And honestly, it sucks because I feel like a boring album is worse than a bad album. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
I
like,
agree.
you know, and like there's a lot of boring elements in Saint Anger, but I'm still like able to laugh at some of the lyrics, or like there's a couple riffs, so I'm like, all right, it's not
Yeah.
terrible. But sometimes a boring record is just probably the worst thing you can get in an album in general.
Yeah.
So that's rough, especially coming from their like most successful record or best record.
Yeah. It's I have been in a band, and I kind of understand like that pressure to like follow up like something like that. You're like, should we even try?
Yeah.
Like, and like I'm not saying like they took that approach either of the bands I mentioned. I don't really think that was the case, but it was like it almost seems like, oh, we've already done it. Like we've already made the thing that we wanted to make.
Yeah.
And it's like we're all set. Like because like even if we put out a bad record, we still have that one.
Yeah.
So
Which is like, which I hate that
yeah.
so much. It sucks too, because like that's the same thing. And like I hate bringing this back to Metallica, but
Fair. That's a
with
good
Load and
example.
Reload, like that's literally just them being like, oh, we won, we did it,
Yeah.
we're the best metal band ever, we're the most commercially successful one. And I think coming out of a little place of ego too. It's like, oh, we can just like crap out whatever album we want now and people will probably eat it up. I guess anything we touch is gold. And I think there is an element of that in like some of these records. But that's rough. That's like a really bad, worst album. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. We should have been on to Load when we should have been like suspicious of Load when they're like, hey, our album cover should just be blood and cum. And they're like,
James
sure.
Hetfield hates it. Apparently
Yeah.
he didn't know like until it was released. Who was that? Lars? Who even
Probably Lars.
green
I don't
lighted
know.
that?
I don't
Like
know
that's
who did.
such a gross
Yeah.
concept.
You're like, oh, that's what load means. Cool.
Oh,
Thanks. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Growing up, I actually really liked load. Like I it doesn't age well, but I remember I have like good memories of like Ain't My Bitch and Until It Sleeps and
that's I think until is that reload until it sleeps? I always
no,
mix them up.
I think that's just load. I actually don't know.
Okay.
Let me
Yeah, like honestly, if those two records, so that's 4 LPs between both those albums.
Yeah.
If they made that just one record, one double LP record, that could have been a amazing, amazing record. Because there's some good songs in there. Like if you dig through a bunch of like Until It Sleeps is good. Um,
Yeah, that's
I know
love.
this I know this song gets a lot of hate, but 2x4 I like
Oh
too.
yeah, I like that song
Um
too.
uh
Reload, by the way, is fuel. Give me fuel, give me fire,
Fuel,
give me
yeah, yeah, that's
fire.
like that's a banger. Like that's
Yeah,
almost a live staple.
yeah. And
Um
then yeah, so they have it's just weird. Metallica's
and then
weird.
you get Mama Said, which is like their country song,
Yeah,
where it's like James Hetfield with like cowboy boots and like a cowboy hat, like in the
yeah.
back of a pickup truck with an acoustic guitar. It's like, what happened? Like, what are you doing? Um,
Metallica.
it just doesn't work. You can't, unless you're like King Gizzard or something, you can't jump off that hard. You have to either, if you want to start making country music after like making one of the like while being in one of the most successful thrash metal bands of all time, just make turn it into a solo project, make another side band. I don't know, man. Like to put it under Metallica is crazy.
Mhm.
Um, but all right, I'll go speaking of Metallica, let's go into my next one by the great Mega Dave Mustaine of Megadeth. And I'm talking about 2013 Super Collider. Um,
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Risk.
no,
Go
no,
on.
I think this is worse than Risk.
Okay, go on.
Risk was a risk. But I think a lot of this like material and Risk is way more interesting than like anything on this record.
Okay.
Um, I think the only thing cool on Super Collider is Kingmaker, um, which almost kind of sucked because there's this really cool bass intro in the song Kingmaker, which brings us into the whole album. And apparently Dave Ellefson wrote it without like Dave's consent at all, Dave Mustaine's consent, and
Oh
Dave
yeah, yeah.
hated it. But it's shocking to hear that because I love it. I think it's a really, really good Megadeth song and they should play it more. It's a little too Children of the Grave, maybe. Like it's very similar, but I think it's still a banger. Um I just want to say I want to give this album like credits due. Dave's vocals aren't that bad on this. Like they're pretty good, pretty moderate vocals. Um, this is also dad rock, Dave. This is the most dad rock album in all of thrash metal. Probably all of thrash metal in general. Super Collider sucks as a song, like as a title track. And the music video that came with it was the corniest thing I've ever seen. Just like a super tropey love story with like a nerd and some just like hot blonde that they went to the same school and she went the dad was like abusive to her. It's just so dumb. And the song sucks. It's just Dave trying to almost be commercial. Like it's him trying to just make dad rock. Um, and I think it's an utter failure. You got the song Burn too, which is like, I guess fun, but it's a little corny. Like a lot of this stuff seems really weird. And there's a cover of Cold Sweat, which, you know, Megadeth doesn't really add anything to the song. It's a song that gets covered a lot, I feel like. So Megadeth covering it seems like they're just kind of begging for radio play. Um, but I don't know. There's a song also called Dance in the Rain, um, which we all know Megadeth as being like kind of punk thrash metal. Um, and you know, whatever with Dave's politics, you know what I mean? But you can't help but like discuss the cool subject matter in a lot of those early Megadeth records that were like punk and were really politically driven that were cool.
Mhm.
But Dave almost feels like he has to talk about it on this record because there's there's this song called Dance in the Rain, and it's literally like just Dave talking like, you probably hate working at your 9 to 5, don't you? Doesn't the graveyard shift suck? It's like, all right, dude. It's like you're literally
Chill
gonna
out.
tell the listeners. Like, it's so lazy. Like, I think Kingmaker's the only redemption, but compared to Risk, yeah, Risk like is the black sheep out of all their albums, but I think it's still an interesting album.
That's fair.
I think Prince of Darkness is better than anything off this.
Okay.
Um and like there's some weird songs on Risk, but it's still like the
It's
riffs, the
it's
lyrics,
experimental, you know?
it's experimental and it's way more interesting.
Yeah.
Risk isn't a good Megadeth record, but like I still enjoy a lot of elements of Risk, but this, like, I can't see anybody enjoying. Like, I just think it's such a bad record. Luckily we got Dystopia in 2016, 3 years later, but like, yikes. Like, a lot of people gave up on Megadeth when this album came out. And until their latest release, The Sick, The Dying, The Dead, people actually are like, all right, so is Megadeth good again? I'll check it out maybe. Because this album, like almost 10 years ago, like people are still recovering from how bad the taste was in their mouth. So I'm glad people are kind of like coming back to Megadeth, because I think some of their like later stuff is really cool. But Super Collider's like, goddamn, like this could have been the start of a really bad path and like ending to the band's career. So I'm really glad they learned from their mistakes, but Super Collider will forever be like a dud in this band's discography, just like the awful, like just unlistenable record.
That's interesting
Um
because I'm going through like their stuff on Spotify, and it's like one of the only albums that they have the commentary for.
do they actually? That's so
Yeah.
weird. I think I knew one of their albums had commentary. That's
Yeah, that's
weird.
the one.
There is this song though on it called "The Blackest Crow," which about it's about dementia, I'm pretty sure, and it's kind of cool. It's got like a
Mhm.
banjo in it,
That's neat.
but again, it's like it's not really interesting musically, and I wish they did more with it. But yeah, that's my fourth pick, Super
Okay.
Collider.
All right. My next pick is kind of quick. Um, just the latest album by Mastodon.
Really?
Like
You don't like
Hush,
it?
Hushed and Grim. So, all right. I will say I started off the album being like, okay, like this good stuff. Good riffs, you know. Um, I liked it. And that, but like towards the end of the album, I was like, fatigue. I was like, okay, I feel like you guys, this is like the same thing. I feel like they just didn't like go anywhere like experimental with it. I feel like, and I get it because it's like I think it's about like one of their producers that passed away.
Huh,
Like
really?
I think that's what it. But and I don't mean any disrespect by like I love Mastodon. I really do. I think they write some interesting stuff. I think vocally it suffered. Just like
Yeah.
the lyrics were good, but like the vocals just weren't interesting enough to like catch my interest, which is strange again, as I told you, like I don't tend to care about vocals, but the thing is about vocals is they are in the forefront because that's like what everybody cares about, like on an average, because that's what people can sing along to. And so they're usually like the most important part of an album is just the vocals.
Especially to like the average listener, you
Exactly.
know?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, because like musicians are gonna pick their favorite instrument. Like to me, if their drums or the bass are good, then it's a good album. But for like most people sing to albums, so they need to have good vocals or good lyrics or something like that. I just felt like it was just kind of uninspired in terms of like the melodies that were sung.
I kind of agree. So like I listened to it once. I don't really take anything away from it. I'm not the biggest Mastodon fan. But I heard like I didn't see a ton of hate for it online. So I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, I'll check it out. And like it was fine. It was a fine record. Um, I definitely get what you mean by uninspired.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the songs just feel like they bleed into one another
Yeah.
and no tracks really stand out.
Exactly.
So I totally understand what you're saying. And it again, it was just kind of forgettable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Same.
but I'm interested that was like one of your picks.
I mean, like
That's
it's got like it's got a cool bass solo and like what was it, Tear Jerker or whatever? I can't remember the name of
I don't
like
know. It's again like just a kind of a forgettable record.
it is like, but I mean, they have like it's cool production. It's not. Again one that doesn't necessarily deserve to be on the list of like shit, but like I don't know. That's my pick. It's just
Yeah.
I gave it a listen. Tear drinker.
It's
It's
called
very
Tear Drinker.
yeah, not tear
That's kind of
jerker.
that's kind of a stupid name though. Tear Drinker.
Yeah. I
Like
think
I
they should
think
change
that's
it to tear jerker.
yeah, that'd be more fitting, honestly.
But yeah, that's my
Cool.
not much backstory to that one. I just put it on. I was like, eh.
Fair enough. Like, and again, like I think that goes to like one of your picks too, where like some of the worst records are just like the boring, like
Mhm.
you listen to it and you're like, didn't really move me, didn't really do anything for me. It just felt like one song I just listened to, all
Yeah.
the none of the riffs stand. I've gotten that a lot, but they honestly suffer worse deaths than albums I don't like where I just forget them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
probably could have done a list of like 10 or more, but there's so many just bad albums that I've almost erased from my brain or just listened to and just forgot like
Y-
within minutes. Like, oh God, I'll put on Rust in Peace now.
Yeah.
Like, like a palate cleanser and it'll completely erase any taste to that last record.
I think that's what made this like such an intriguing topic because like you put out there into the universe of like, hey, do you want to talk about like bad albums by good bands? And I'm like, what are those? Like, because like you obviously don't listen to them more than like a handful of times at most,
Yeah,
or like once, or like so yeah, it was interesting. It's interesting.
cool. Um, so my next pick, I don't think is controversial at all. And again, like, you know, this is a heavy metal podcast, but I also like to call like cover heavy music
Mhm.
in general. And my last pick is actually Music of the Elder. Music for the Elder. Sorry. Um Kiss is released from 1981. So this is a weird album. This is
That's the review. That's it.
music from I keep mixing up. It's music from the Elder, which is such a weird, like, just you hear that name and can't really like figure out what this album's gonna sound like. Um, the only thing metal about this record, looking at like the sleeve, is the name Kiss.
Mhm.
Like the art is just like a door and just someone's bare hand on it. And it says music from the Elder, which personally for me is stupid and and is the only Kiss album without any of the members on it also.
Oh no,
Or since
hot in the shade also didn't.
or okay,
I mean, but
when
that's
was
also
that's in the 90s, right?
89. So yes, 90s.
89. Okay, so this was the first one to not have the members then.
Yeah.
But oh my God, this album sucks. So I'm a
Interesting.
big Kiss fan, like Hotter Than Hell's probably my favorite Kiss record. I love a lot of their poppy stuff too. I'm not crazy about Lick It Up, which, for obvious reasons. But I dig Kiss. I love Kiss. I've seen them live
Mhm.
twice. And I'm 24, so it's born in 98. But so
You're 24.
Yeah,
You look like you killed somebody in the set. Ha 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 ha.
never heard that one
That's
before.
just a joke between us. No
Yeah,
one
it's
else.
a
That's like
comedian thing.
yeah.
But it's a garbage record. So this album was really weird because Kiss always hungered to be more and more commercial. And what we got was a lot of prog bands starting to get commercial in like the early 80s, coming out of the 70s. You got a lot of concept albums too, like uh The Who, Tommy.
Mhm.
Um, you got Quadrophenia, you got The Wall. I feel like there were a lot of prog, um, just concept albums in general. And this was actually Kiss's attempt at one of those. Um, it is hot garbage. There is not a single redeeming factor on this record. Even the cover sucks. So you have
This
this.
is the best review ever. Like it's just
It's just
so
it's
so
trash.
honest.
You have this song, "Just a Boy." You know, uh,
Which then no doubt did just a
Paul
girl.
Stanley's yeah, Paul Stanley's trying to sound like Roger Daltrey.
uh,
Um, Robert, who's the singer of the Who?
oh,
It's Roger, right?
oh,
Daltrey. Daltrey.
yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So he's trying to like a lot of this reminds me of like someone doing karaoke of songs off Tommy. That's what some of this record reminds me of. These are by far the worst Kiss vocals I've heard in my life. Just a Boy is a classic example of that because Kiss always sang like, it's rock and roll. It's like a lot of metal elements. So you get a certain like kind of almost like glam style of vocals and just like traditional heavy metal style coming out of Paul, but he's trying to sing like these super high notes and they sound awful. It's like you can't help but just like cringe every time you hear him. And this song, like musically, is just like all over the place. And this whole record is a disaster. Like it's a wreck. I can't believe there must be people who defend this record. I can't imagine. I seriously can't. They're trying to be prog, which fails. I guess you can appreciate some elements of this record, but it just all falls apart. It's just corny. The lyrics are weird, like just super, especially coming out of Kiss. Like this whole story they're trying to tell is just like kind of weird, and like this is the Kiss concept album. The amount of lore and just like looking at their albums, like they're these space demons, you know like God knows the things you can come up with for a Kiss concept
Yeah.
album. Music from the Elder, and it's just it's so I can't even tell you what the story's about. I listened to it just to like I've listened to it once and I'm like I'm never gonna do that again. And then this episode, I'm like, I gotta throw it on there, and I'm like, I'll re-listen because I re-listened to most of all of this albums on my list. Um, and god damn, this one the hardest to get through. Because it was just like again, it was everything we talked, like it was boring too. Like, yeah, it's like I guess if you listen to it, if you're a Kiss fanatic and you listen to this album 80 times, you can probably yank some kind of enjoyment out of, oh, that was a cool little time signature thing. That was a cool little, but that's still like, it doesn't hold up to the terrible songwriting. And there's no like defending this, like 81 too. Oh my God, the 80s was probably one of the greatest decades for metal. And I don't know what Kiss was doing. I think they were just super desperate for like more radio play, being more commercial. I think they were just being a little greedy. I think they just should have kept evolving their sound instead of completely starting from scratch with this record. Like it sounds like almost like a high school band trying to write a prog album and a concept album. Like the story, like again, all of this feels so uninspired. Um Also, funny thing about this album, the track list is scrambled. Uh there's actually like the right listening order online, but originally when this album came out, the tracks were not in order. So
Oh,
even if
weird.
you're following the lyrics in the story, it does not make sense because it's all shuffled. Like
Oh
it's
no.
ridiculous how much of a fumble this album is. Like I will bash this album so much. Like I just can't find, and like all these other records I'm talking about, like Super Collider can't, like Forbidden can be saved, Saint Anger can be saved. This is so far gone. You could, if I was like a producer and you laid this on my lap, I'm like, call the cemetery. It's over. This album sucks. It's a garbage Kiss album. And like they had like records in like the 2010s that are far, far better than music from the Elder. Like it really blows my mind. I'm just curious what Kiss released after. Um Creatures of the Night, of course. Yeah. So Kiss, after this record, they're like, okay, I guess we have to release something super heavy. So they released Creatures of the Night as like War Machine and stuff, and it's like the heaviest. I guess you can argue it's heavier either that it's it's even heavier than Hotter Than Hell. A mind hiccup. But like, and it's a great album, but God, like you can't sweep that under the rug, no matter how you try it. Like, I don't know, man. That's my last one. Music from the Elder. It is
Man,
so bad.
saving a very good commentary for the end.
Yeah.
That was good. I almost feel like we should just end there.
I don't know.
It's like,
Someone's gonna defend that record, but
yeah.
I don't know,
So
man.
so my last pick, because it wouldn't be a podcast with Nate if I wasn't gonna shit on Tool.
Let's hear it.
So, all right. So in 2006, Tool put out an album called 10,000 Days. It's centered around
Wow.
Maynard's mother passing away. It's a fucking great album, in my opinion.
The Pot.
And then, yeah, so many great songs from it. And then, like, over 10 years later, they put out an album and it just doesn't seem inspired at all. Like, they had so much time to come up with like so much stuff, and I just feel like they just didn't. I'm gonna be completely honest, I couldn't listen to it. The Tool's latest
Are
album.
we talking about Fear Inoculum?
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I felt like my
Wow.
life was passing me by while I was listening to it, because it just seemed like they had so much space in it, like, and
Yeah.
so much like ambience and texture stuff, which I get is art, but like I have things to do. Like, and
Yeah.
like for me, like it would have probably been fine had I like been able to just throw on their album and work. But like I do video editing. You can't really listen to music while you're video editing. Like you need to like listen to the audio of the video and like figure that out. Had I been working on like other shit, it could possibly been a decent record to like, maybe like the second listen to, you're like, oh, okay, it starts to grow on you. But I couldn't get to that point. I just was like,
Hmm.
I put it on and I was really interested in listening to it. And then like maybe 5 minutes into like the first song or something, or like let me check it out. Yeah, like yeah, 5 minutes into the first song.
The title track, right?
Yeah, because it's like a 10-minute song.
Wow,
I
I
was like,
actually thought Fear Inoculum was like the easiest listening song, in my opinion.
didn't they put that out before?
That was the, I believe, the first single.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it totally was. Yeah, that was the first single. Um, and again, like when I remember when I first heard Fear Inoculum, like the song,
Mhm.
um, I wasn't blown away by it at all. I was like, okay, all right. And like I'm like, all right, let me listen to it again. It's like, okay, all right. I feel like that whole record is just an album for Tool fans.
I kind of was
Um,
getting that feeling too. And
yeah,
again, I will say that Tool is probably one of like the most influential bands on me, like in terms of like writing and everything. It's just so interesting because like from everybody listening to this podcast perspective, it's just like the band that I like shit on the most. But like I do like Tool. I just I wanted more from this album because it's like so usually bands first album is just something out of this, like it's completely out of this world. And usually, not always, it's because they had a long time to work on it. Like because they weren't like successful yet, they could just like make all the songs that they want. And then like once they've made it, they're like, okay, let's put our best songs on there. And like it and again, I'm generalizing, so it's not like every band, but it's like
yeah,
if you think about it from like a band's life, it's like okay, you're in a band for a while and like you put out song after song after song, you're doing shows for a while, and then finally like usually what like 5-10 years down the road somebody discovers you and gives you a record deal, and
yeah,
now all of a sudden you have this entire catalog of like okay, I know which ones people liked and what works and what doesn't. It's kind of like stand up, like you go to open mic, you try out your shit, and then like
yeah.
when you get a show, you're like, all right, I'm only going to do the good ones. I
Hmm.
I feel like given that it was from uh I said 2006, right? I think that's when 10,000
Yes.
Days came out. And I think this latest one came out in 2019.
Yeah. 2019.
Yeah, okay. Um, that's a long time to like work on songs. And I'm not saying they were working on that songs. It doesn't sound like they were.
They took their time with that record.
Yeah.
They weren't like, all right, we got to get this out the door. Like I doubt they were in any sort of rush or like, hey, let's get this song done by here. Let's get this song done by then.
Mhm.
Um, it seems like just a record of deep cuts. And like, let me just say, like, set the record straight. I like Fear Inoculum.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, I had the opposite thing with you, where like I heard it the first time and I'm like, okay. And if anything, it grew on me because it's just such a behemoth of a record. Um, and there's just so many moving parts, so many time signatures and notes and like so many 10-minute songs, and it's just so overwhelming where again it's going to scare off the average listener.
Yeah.
But for me, like, people were praising it, Tool fans. So I'm like, okay, let me like really listen to this and keep listening. And then like looking back at it, like Numa is one of my favorite Tool songs. Invincible, I love. But compared to like Undertow, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a good Tool album for Tool fans, and I think that's where it ends. Um, like they're awesome to hear live and whatnot, but again, like it's just because Tool hasn't released anything in so long, and you get songs with so many notes. So I feel like a song like Invincible is gonna last a while,
Mhm.
before you're sick of it, because there's just so much going on, and the whole record too. Um, I feel like for people who like the album, they have the opportunity to like really just like get as many listens out of it as possible, because there's so much content on that album.
There is.
Um, which I think it's like greatest strength, but at the same time, like its biggest weakness. Um, which sucks, but at the same time, like I feel like Tool needed something like that, where it's like, let's just drop like just a record for the fans, something that people like probably won't get sick of, because it's just so like just so meaty and so much to it. But I think that was its biggest downfall, especially comparing it to like 10,000 Days, their last one, Undertow, which Undertow is probably my favorite of theirs.
Same.
And the rest of them are fantastic. You get
Yeah.
a what's the one with Third Eye?
Lateral, is that on
No,
the no?
it's not Lateralis. It's the only one we haven't mentioned.
Uh,
Um,
Anima.
yeah, yeah. It's got that Bill Hicks sample in it.
Oh yeah, yeah, it
Um,
does.
which Third Eye is my favorite Tool song of all time. Regardless of the Bill Hicks sample, I'm being a little biased because I love Bill Hicks. He's probably my favorite, one of my favorite comedians. But the song is a trip and it is awesome. And I feel like, especially in like that record, a lot of the songs are able to like stand on their own 2 feet, and like,
Mhm.
it's easy to distinguish like them from each other. But again, like a song, an album, I mean, like a Fear Inoculum, it's really just a solo for 2 hours.
It just seems like it's more artistic, and that's fine. Like it's just not my cup of tea. Like it seems like it's more of like a soundscape than like
Yeah,
an actual legitimate album, which like we all know that Tool can put out some great stuff, and like they can put out some like mind-blowing riffs, and it just seems like they just more went towards like creating a feeling rather than like entertainment, which is, again, you're allowed to do that. It's
yeah.
fine. And it's just not for me, man. Like some people can jam to like just a song just going like the first like 4 minutes before any other thing drops, and
Yeah.
like it's a build and they're like, oh yeah, that really gets them going. Me, like their first song on that album, I don't even think guitars drop until like 5 minutes, or like any, because it's mostly like hand drums and
Yeah,
like
there's
acoustic
some
stuff.
guitar in the beginning, but
I
it's
meant like distortion or like
okay.
like
Yeah, yeah, like
cymbals, and
riffs.
yeah, like riffs. Like
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
like flowing sort of chant sort of kind of feel to it.
Psychedelic,
Psychedelic, yeah,
you
there we
know.
go. Which is, again, it can be good, and I, in a different time, might have been my favorite album. I guess I'm just like super impatient, and I'm like really hunting for like, I have such a small amount of time where I can listen to music. Like I want it to be that. I want it to be like entertainment. I want it to be like a break from what I do. And I think when albums have too much space, it just gives me too much time to think. And it's just like, okay, like fuck. Now I'm thinking too much about it. So
Yeah, and a lot of those albums sometimes suffer of like becoming boring, where if you don't like the first song, you're gonna hate
it's
the rest of the
it's
album.
really tough. It's
Where
really
where a
tough.
lot of Tool albums, if you don't like the first song, give the next one a try, and if not, the
Yeah.
next one. Where this record, it's all the same sound.
Hmm.
So if you don't like the first one, you're probably gonna hate the rest of it.
I skipped through, like I was like, maybe there's like a cool part somewhere, and I just I felt
Like,
like one of those things where I feel like it doesn't deserve to be on this list from my perspective, because I didn't give it a full listen, but because my expectations of what Tool can be and what I was hoping for after all of those years of waiting for an album just to get like what it was like. And again, I'm not like your average Tool fan, so it wasn't for me. I get it,
yeah,
but like I wanted like more like really cool riffs and more like, I wanted more like the pot, like that
yeah,
shit was
yeah,
fucking rad.
yeah. The Pot is such an awesome song.
And like Vicarious is also pretty cool too. It's
Yeah,
like
oh
those
yeah,
are really cool songs, and like they have really interesting riffs and like super different rhythms
really
and
awesome.
yeah.
But yeah, also like there's is a lot of, from what I've heard, like a lot of clipping on Tool's newest release. Like production wise, I heard it's like a little bit of a mess.
A little bit.
Um, yeah. Uh, but hey, I think we'll end it there.
Okay. There's
Good list.
there's some honorable mentions, but mostly it's Opeth.
Yeah.
Because like
You want
I
to
feel
list
like
them?
I feel like after Watershed, like Opeth kind of got a little bit too experimental. They kind of brought it back with their latest album, but for me, I
I like
stopped
their
listening.
latest.
I love it. It's great. It's nice to hear that they're kind of getting back to their roots, but I think like since all of the members have been changing, like it was a little bit chaos to like try to keep a consistent sound. And it would be boring if they kept a consistent sound, but there's just some parts on Watershed that are pretty silly.
Mm,
So you're like, huh. Um, which is exactly where if we were able to play samples without copyright being a thing, there would be an example right now of like this really weird drum fill that they do during like it just goes berserk, and they just got kind of experimental, and that's fine. Like again, bands are allowed to do whatever they want, but
yeah.
it was one of those things where it's like Opeth released a new album. Should I check it out? It sucks. God damn it. Like
Yeah.
luckily I checked out their latest album because like I had almost given up. Like Muse, I've completely disowned Muse because they've just gone into like this pop world.
Yeah, I'm over Muse.
But
For me, a record is the Spaghetti Incident by Guns N' Roses. I just think it's just bad. Like it's one of those albums that is just extremely just forgettable.
yeah.
Um, I didn't even know it existed like until recently, and then I heard it. I'm like, what was that? Like people, a lot of people like have Chinese Democracy as like the bad one.
Mhm.
But I love that record actually. I love Buckethead. Um, I think
Buckethead's
that's a
awesome.
super underrated GNR record. I think Chinese Democracy is awesome, but Spaghetti Incident, it's just such a stupid album. Like
Yeah.
even the like
The
again, like
name.
I don't want to keep like like just backtracking, but the cover sucks. The name is weird. What? This what band is this again? And then you hear it, it's like what it's like they're so lost. They've
Mhm.
lost their way so much, but I don't know. That's my
Honorable mention.
honorable mention.
Nice.
Um but yeah,
Good
let's
talk.
wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Do you want to plug anything?
Uh I have a comedy show going on in December 4th. Go to
December
Boston.
4th in Boston.
It's the Lyric Stage. It's gonna be great. It's
What's
benefits
your ads too?
uh for me I think it's Nate Filler's comedy
Cool.
on Instagram. Um but yeah, this is a good show. It benefits mental health. Yeah.
Awesome.
Like, go if you're in the area and like have that in December.
Also, your YouTube channel as well.
Oh yeah, I do stuff on YouTube. Space Bear, spelled SBASSBEAR. Yeah,
A lot of
got the
skits,
music.
funny comedy stuff,
Yeah,
music,
fun.
a lot of fun. All right,
Yeah.
this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for
Let's do
having me
this.
on.
We'll be doing this very soon. And yeah, I'm Brandon Baddock, and this has been Disturbing the Priest.